face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. This nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident.
Hello and welcome to episode 18 in the Policy Dialogue series with alumni, staff, faculty, and students from the University of Maryland School of Public Policy. The views expressed do not represent official positions of the school or alumni network. Our goal is to discuss specific policy solutions that can address and solve the current local, national, and international challenges we face. My name is Evan Papp, and I graduated with the class of 2011 with a focus on international security and economic policy. And I'm the executive producer of Empathy Media Lab, which publishes content on labor, political economy, art, and culture. Joining me is fellow alum Matt Verghese, who is the chief of staff for U.S. Congressman Anthony Brown, who represents Maryland's 4th Congressional District. Matt has also served as a senior advisor on the Van Hollen for Senate campaign, as well as political and communications director for the Maryland Democratic Party, and as a senior legislative aide in the Montgomery County Government. So he's been in municipal, state, and federal politics and policy. So great to see you, Matt. Long time.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be here.
So could you talk about your background and how you first got interested in public policy?
As I was in school, in high school, and then in college, my first kind of transformative moment politically was Bush v. Gore. I was a doe-eyed 9th grader freshman in high school, not understanding about what was going on in our country. And then living through the Bush years with 9/11, the Iraq War, Katrina, it was just really telling about you were upset with the direction we were going in. And realizing that how do you bring about some type of change in this country is that you have to actually be part of that change. And it's not just being part of that change in terms of voting and being politically active, it's actually supporting candidates that, support your own values. And it's getting into the arena yourself and doing the grinding work day in and day out to see the change you want to really, occur in this country. I was very lucky that at the right moment and right time, I joined the fledgling campaign of a little-known senator called Barack Obama back in 2007. And the friend who recruited me to that campaign told me it'll be the best 8 months of your life. I've never done a presidential campaign until that moment. And he thought it'd just be a good ride. We'll talk about our issues. You'll make a great network and that'll pay dividends for you long-term. That 8 months became 18 months. And really, I just got a front row seat into a lot of important things, after the Great Recession, trying to get universal health care to a lot of people. And I think a really important presidency in our country. And it just kind of told me that, you can't be a bystander to these events. What's going on in this country, around the world, needs people like us to be engaged, be involved, and to do the blood, sweat, and tears to see something actually occur.
Well said. We are all responsible of what's happening and we can all do our part. And I'm interested in what specific policies were you most interested when you're studying public policy? Is there a particular sector or topic that you're more attracted to in working on?
Absolutely. And it's funny, like here in Congress, I am almost forced to be a generalist. We deal with so many different issues every single week. Like just let alone this month itself, we're going to deal with gun violence and labor organizing and immigration and, COVID relief. You have to almost be an expert in so many different areas in order to be successful. But what really called me when I was studying is that, right during the middle of the recession, to understand how dollars and investments really drive government policies was what my focus was on. It's like, I think I realized, when I was studying for my master's, we went through, the debt ceiling fight where we almost defaulted on the debt here in the United States for the first time. We saw the government shut down, and you realize that money and our concept of the federal budget and the concept about how many resources we have to actually help people drives the policy discussion. And it can be driven towards, we need to cut, we need to save, the debt's too big, or it can be driven towards, we have some real challenges in this country that need us to invest the resources to help our fellow men and women. And I think I realized if you can understand money, you can understand the budget, you can understand, both the income coming in and the expenditures, you have real power in public policy. So I really focus on that. And that really gave me my start, is that when you understand fiscal conditions and you can understand to where you can find extra pots of money to fund your priorities, you can get things done. And nothing kind of moves the needle more than, when I started out in state government, finding an extra $1 million to fund, the expansion of, homeless benefits, or finding $2 million to make sure that we can get, help more people get broadband in the city of Baltimore. And I think understanding, like wrapping my mind around numbers really helped me kind of establish myself as a policy professional.
Absolutely. And love to get into the idea of austerity versus government spending and the actual return on investment that you have. And when you start cutting government spending, you're actually going to contract the economy and have a circular effect where the more you cut, the less money that goes into circulation. So it generally doesn't work.
No, absolutely. And it's really funny how, at the federal level, at the state level, we have a lot of good budget analysts who tell us what things cost, what the trade-offs are. And it's up to our public policy makers to understand, okay, what costs money. And generally in government, we think tax cuts are free. And we think when we make investments, whether it's in infrastructure or education or just in working families in general, that costs money. Just the concept of where dollars are flowing, or just the concept about like almost a third of government expenditures are done in our tax code by giving breaks and write-offs for different activities. Those tax expenditures are worth hundreds of billions of dollars every year to the United States government, but we don't count that as spending. And so, as we look at the challenges and especially going through this pandemic, confronting working families in this country and where the need really is in affordable healthcare, and making sure we're doing the R&D and in investment in medical research, to talk about infrastructure that we've been talking about, since Eisenhower, and really haven't done a whole lot of new things on. Those things take real investment, and those things take resources, and we didn't make those choices because there's a real return. There's a real kind of positive externality in terms of every dollar we spend for one of those things. What's the externality towards helping a big business keep money offshore? What's the externality when who has benefited from this pandemic, and we see this from the numbers, are the people making a whole lot of money. And so when we consider options like a wealth tax, when we consider options like how do we expand and make sure that we're spending the right amount of money, we're talking about $2 trillion right now in COVID relief, and we need to do that. And I think you just see how far the window has shifted since 2008, since President Obama, where we were arguing about, $900 billion back then after the Great Recession was too big. Now we're at $2 trillion. I think we have fought successfully to say that we need the federal government, we need government in general to step up during times of crisis and get things done.
Absolutely. And when the market fails, the government's the last protector of the people. And absolutely. There is the return on investment. Apollo program, space program, 10-1. We got so many spin-off commercial technologies from it. And there's also a penalty if you have an electrical system that doesn't work and it completely collapses, and you have China able to have the cheapest electricity in the world because they're building coal plants every 3 months, then they're going to outcompete you in your product. So there's a return on investment. I really appreciate you talking about that. I do want to talk about your work as a chief of staff. A lot of people don't even know how much work that is. How big is your team? And what is, I know it's every day is different, but how big is your team, and what has it been like being a chief of staff?
Absolutely. So like I work for a member of Congress on the House side. Our teams are actually much smaller than people imagine. We have about 20 people on my staff. Half of them work in Washington, half of them work in our district here in Maryland. And really every day we have a whole ton of incoming. I think my job as chief of staff is, of course, I'm a counselor, I'm an advisor to my member. I'm probably the last person he talks to before he goes and votes, when he's considering what bills and initiatives to kind of put forward. But more than anything else, and beyond working for a member directly, our goal, and the goal that Mr. Brown has always said, is that how are we serving our constituents on any given day? People don't realize that the top priority for us every day are the people who call in, who ask about their unemployment, who ask about their Social Security benefits, who ask, why are they in a wait list for the VA? And how do you make sure that those constituents are getting the service that they need, number one. Number two, though, is that beyond getting them the federal services that they deserve and they are owed, is that how are we helping to make their life a little bit better and a little bit easier? And are we using every tool that we have in a congressional office to move that ball forward? And it's not just, writing a bill and getting a law passed. And I can say on that point, and we're very, very proud of our legislative record, but you can use your influence in so many different ways, leaning on state and county government to make some of those changes, working with business who sometimes have the resources to do a lot more, whether when it comes to workforce development and education or investing in communities, leaning on private entities. And generally using your influence to elevate issues that sometimes don't get the recognition that they need. Whether it's, poor housing and moldy housing, people getting kicked out of their homes, people who don't have broadband when we went to full virtual schooling. People need an advocate just as much as they need a fighter inside the halls of Congress. And so really my job is to, with the 20 people that we have, with the 24 hours a day that we have, what things can we get done? And how do we not lose sight of the big picture every day? It's easy to get lost in the churn of Washington and the Hill. And sometimes it's just important to just take a step back and make sure that you're being strategic and not losing perspective over what is really, really important.
And you're on call 24 hours a day. And I really respect all the work that people do on the Hill. And I know government oftentimes and Congress gets a real bad rap, but I think Anthony Brown represents a much more responsive form of representative than a lot of other folks out there. But I want to turn the conversation to January 6th and the political violence during that day. I personally was disgusted. I was very angry when I saw what was happening on that day. And I know the media is placing a lot of emphasis on bipartisanship. And so what is your experience and what does bipartisanship look like to you after the political violence of January 6th?
Let's not be mistaken. Like, it is the reason why we got to January 6th is because you had the president of the United States at that time, Donald Trump, people around him, his friends in media, his friends in business, his friends in, all across this country, spreading a big lie. And I say a lie because we know it is categorically false, that this election was stolen, that there was rampant fraud. And when you have the leader of our country endorsing that opinion, we should not be surprised that his supporters and people who love him, trust him, and will do anything for him, act in that manner, because they truly believe that something was taken away from them, even though we know there's no basis in fact. And so I think we saw what happened on January 6th in terms of when you have a leader who's so unhinged, who cares more about their own selfish political power than what is right for this country. We've had presidents lose before, and we've had presidents who show the class and dignity that they needed because they put the country first. And I think we had an occupant of the White House for the last 4 years who put himself first. And the result of that behavior and that selfishness we saw on January 6th, where you literally had Americans attack their own government to overturn the will of the American people. But that being said, it is easy to say that, the solution to our ills as a country, and President Biden says this, is that we have to come together. We have to be united, that we have to think about what unites us rather than divides us. I'm all with that. But I think, very rarely in this country are there clear rights and wrongs. I think we all come to this with the sense that we know the right answer and we have to figure out what is the pathway to get something done. And unfortunately, I think you have one side in Washington who's more focused on, social media, the attention, going viral, rather than think about what are the policies and objectives that we can be pursuing to help the American people. You talk about COVID relief, whether it's vaccinations or helping people in small businesses that are struggling. What is their solution? What is their plan? It's easy to say no to something. And so is bipartisanship trying to convince someone who doesn't want to work with you to work with you? Or is bipartisanship trying to find those members on both sides of the aisle who are willing to actually have a a constructive dialogue and conversation about how do we make life better for the American people. And I think we saw after January 6th is that the real test is right now, all the governing is being done by one side. We need to find willing partners on the other side. And unfortunately, we didn't see it. The COVID relief bill passed through the House with not one Republican in support. And what was in that bill? Money for families, money for rent relief, money to go to states and localities so we don't fire teachers and firefighters and first responders, money for unemployment benefits. You tell me something in that bill that, again, the polls tell us 70% of the American people support what's in the American Rescue Plan, and we got 0 Republican votes. At some point, you had to stop trying to find willing partners and go with the people that you have.
And talk to the American people, because the vast majority want action and need help that the Democrats are actually trying to address. And I know we're very short on time. So in closing, from your perch on Capitol Hill, where do you see opportunity and hope?
It is hard to do my job if you didn't wake up every day optimistic, if you didn't wake up every day hopeful about what the future holds, not only for yourself and your family, but the country that we all love. I'm optimistic because with President Biden, with Vice President Harris, I think we have a team in the White House that is so laser focused on not only defeating this virus, getting us out of the pandemic, but restoring faith in government for the American people. The American people want government that works. They want a government that is responsive to their needs and is responsive to how they are suffering right now. And I think you have a leadership team and with their allies in Congress, in terms of that, they're so focused on getting stuff done that the time for talk and endless debate is behind us, and they want to see real practical results. Way too many problems in this country have been ignored for far too long. You mentioned infrastructure or immigration or how do we stop gun violence. Like, we spend way too long in Washington and state capitals around our country talking about the problems that we see and not doing anything about them. I think going through the recession, going through this pandemic, going through this economic crisis that we're in right now has shown us that the way that you restore faith in government, the way that you bring people together is by showing that government's on their side and that we're willing to do the hard work in order to uplift families and to put them on a path so that their tomorrows are better, that they can wake up in the morning and be hopeful. And I see that work right now. It's easy to say that every day is long, every day, is long hours, and there's a lot of things to get done. But we're doing that because we see a small window to really show that we understand what's going on in this country as public policymakers, as staff, and that we're going to do something about it. That we're not going to be kind of, like just ignore what's going on around us or sit in our bubbles and just like continue just to litigate this on cable news. I think President Biden, Vice President Harris, congressional Democrats know that, we have to get, I was about to say shit done, but frankly, we didn't get shit done. And understand that, if we don't do it now, it is hard to go back to the American people and say, give us another try, give us another chance. And so I think what we get done in the next 100 days at the end of this year will really be consequential about the trajectory of this country coming out of the pandemic, coming back to hopefully a normal, and also like, what is the future we're leaving for our kids and for our grandkids? No grandkids here, but like we're always thinking about that next generation. And if we don't make the investments right now, and we don't start to think about that next pandemic, that next crisis, and say, how do we make sure that there isn't that much suffering next time around? We haven't learned anything. And so I think I'm focused on the future. I'm optimistic about the leaders that we have. And I'm hopeful that we can get real meaningful policy done in the next couple months.